in the suffocating darkness of a small room on a Pennsylvania street corner, an 8-year-old girl trembled as she clutched a threadbare teddy bear, listening intently to the heavy footsteps of her drunken father outside. Night after night, the creak of the door became the harbinger of her nightmares. In that silent world, her eyes flickered with a faint glimmer of hope. Is there anyone who will listen to me? This is not just a story about bruises on tender skin, or the cold sting of a belt. It's the story of a child's journey to find light in the darkest corners of life. It's the quiet plea of countless children yearning for an outstretched hand, a comforting embrace, and someone brave enough to say, "Everything will be all right." And then, in that darkest night, a miracle arrived, not by some fairy tale magic, but through the trembling yet courageous voice of the little girl herself, a voice that sparked a small candle, bright enough to lead her out of her personal hell and become a beacon of hope for countless other children. Come now, and step into the story of Emily Morgan, a tale of courage, compassion, and the extraordinary power of those who dare to listen. In the small, quiet room at the end of the long hallway, 8-year-old Emily Morgan, her brown hair tousled across her forehead, curled herself into a tiny cocoon on the worn-out mattress. Beside her, a ragged teddy bear named Mr. Buttons, the only remnant of her once happy days with her mother, was clutched tightly to her chest, like a shield against the lurking darkness. A thin stream of moonlight slipped through the frayed curtain, leaving a faint glow on the faded carpet. Every trembling breath Emily took felt like the whisper of autumn leaves outside the window. The house where Emily lived with her father, Mr. Jack Morgan, used to be filled with laughter and the scent of her mother's apple pies. But ever since her mother was taken away by a cruel illness, it had become a cold, desolate prison. Every night Emily pretended to be asleep when the heavy footsteps of her father echoed on the creaky wooden floor. The sound of the door creaking open was like a silent scream in the little girl's chest. She knew that even the slightest sound could set him off. Tonight was no different. Emily curled up tighter, clutching Mr. Buttons so hard that the stuffing inside felt as solid as a rock. The room was thick with the smell of dampness and the faint tang of whiskey drifting from the living room where Miss Jack sat drinking. He always drank as if to drown the memories of his lost wife. But when the alcohol seeped into his veins, he turned into someone else angry, terrifying his eyes clouded with hatred and rage. Emily remembered the peaceful days when her mother was still alive. Her mother always sang lullabies before she fell asleep, her voice as gentle as rustling leaves. "Sleep well, my little princess," she would whisper before planting a soft kiss on her forehead. Now all those memories were just sharp shards of pain in Emily's heart. She longed to hear that voice one more time, but the room only answered with the eerie creaks of rotting wood. In the living room, Mr. Jack slammed his glass down so hard, it cracked shards of glass tinkling to the floor. Emily flinched, her heart pounding like a frantic drum. She knew what was coming. The faint light from the living room seeped through the crack in her door, casting a shadow of Mr. Jack as he staggered to his feet. His footsteps thudded on the floor, each one closer, forcing Emily to hold her breath. In that moment, every one of Emily's senses stretched taut, like a violin string. The door hinge creaked, then the door burst open so violently it hit the wall with a deafening bang. Emily shivered her tiny hand, clutching Mr. Buttons so hard her fingers turned white. The dim hallway light spilled into the small room outlining Mr. Jack's towering figure in the doorway. The smell of whiskey emanating from him was overpowering, like a nightmare closing in around Emily. Hiding again, Emily. His voice was rough and laced with liquor, each word cutting into the little girl's heart like a knife. Emily trembled, her voice barely a whisper, as she tried to speak. I'm not hiding, Daddy. The words were so faint, they seemed to disappear into the frantic beating of her heart. Mr. Jack stepped into the room, leaving the door ajar. He stood there, tall and swaying like a specter in the night. His murky eyes slid down to the teddy bear Emily clutched. A twisted smile spread across his lined, angry face. You think you need that filthy bear for something? His voice dripped with contempt. In that moment, Emily knew the night would be long. Every night was this long. And all she could do was hold Mr. Buttons tighter, hoping the beatings would end quickly. In her tender heart, a fragile whispering voice called out, as faint as a breeze. Mommy, if you were still alive, would you save me? But around Emily, there was only darkness, the smell of alcohol, and a suffocating fear that pressed in like a vice. The days that followed for Emily Morgan passed like a recurring nightmare, each night a relentless torment of mind and body. After her mother's death, her father Jack Morgan had turned into a stranger, cruel, harsh, and always hiding behind empty whiskey bottles. During the day, Emily still had to go to school like any other child. She carried her old backpack, her tiny shoulders heavy with fear that no one could see. Every step she took made the bruises on her shoulder throb with pain. School, once a haven filled with laughter, had now become a stage for lies. In her third-grade classroom that Monday morning, Emily quietly took her seat at the back, her eyes dark with fatigue, and her tousled hair hiding the red swelling on her left cheek. Ms. Lauren Matthews, a woman with a gentle voice and eyes that always glowed with warmth, entered the class with a smile as tender as morning sunlight. But when her gaze fell on Emily's face, that smile faltered. "Good morning, Emily." Miss Lauren greeted, her eyes shadowed with worry. "Good morning, Miss Emily," replied her voice as small as a mosquito's hum. She winced as her shirt brushed against the fresh bruises on her back. Math class began, and Miss Lauren handed out the worksheets. As she passed by Emily's desk, she leaned down, her voice a soft lullaby. "Are you okay today? I noticed your cheek looks a little swollen." Emily avoided her teacher's gaze, her hands trembling beneath the desk. I fell off my bike," she stammered. "Ms. Lauren sighed, her hand resting gently on Emily's shoulder, like a comforting touch. "If anything's bothering or scaring, you don't hesitate to tell me. You're not alone." Emily's heart key. She wanted to cry, to tell Ms. Lauren that last night her father had smashed a glass on the floor, and slapped her so hard her cheek swelled, just for a look he thought was disrespectful. But then, in her mind, her father's furious face and the reek of alcohol returned along with his harsh, unforgettable threat. "Don't you dare tell anyone if you open your mouth. I swear I'll—" Emily swallowed her tears. I'm fine, miss." After class. As the dismissal bell rang, Miss Lauren gently held Emily back. "Today, I'd like you to come to the library for a bit, okay? I have something I'd like to ask you in private." Emily nodded, but her heart tightened. In her mind, her father's warning echoed. Don't let anyone interfere. That afternoon, the library was quiet, smelling faintly of old books. Ms. Lauren sat on a wooden bench, her eyes filled with worry. "Emily, I'm really concerned about you. If something's happening at home, if someone is hurting you, I can help." Emily clutched the teddy bear Mr. Buttons hidden in her backpack, her throat dry as dust. No one's hurting me, miss," she whispered, her voice quivering. Ms. Lauren looked at the small child in front of her, her gaze as tender as moonlight. "You're very brave, Emily," she said, her voice trembling. "But never forget you deserve to be loved and safe. I'm here for you." Emily pressed her lips together, her eyes brimming with tears. But she still shook her head. She feared her father more than anything else. The next day, when Emily returned home, she had barely set her backpack down when she heard the growl from the living room. "So, you've been talking to that teacher of yours, huh, Jack?" His hands shaking around a whiskey bottle, his eyes bloodshot with rage. No, Dad," Emily tried to explain, but he had already risen, heading straight for her. A slap landed on her face like lightning. The burning pain seared across her cheek, sending her tumbling to the cold floor. Her teddy bear slipped from her grasp and rolled into the corner of the room. "Don't make me have to pick you up from school again, you hear me? If I find out you've said anything to anyone—" Jack's voice was thick with whiskey, making the air feel suffocating. That night, Emily didn't dare let her sobs escape. She curled up on the old mattress, her trembling hands clutching Mr. Buttons, like the only lifeline she had left. In the darkness, she whispered a desperate prayer. "God, if anyone can hear me, please save me." But only the sound of the wind moaning through the window came back to her cold and uncaring. In the long nights that followed, Emily still went to school, still hid her bruises beneath long sleeves. Ms. Lauren continued to watch her, her eyes full of concern. One Friday afternoon, as Emily was leaving class, Ms. Lauren called her back. "Emily, please don't leave just yet. I need you to stay for a moment." In the library, the setting sun streamed through the window, illuminating Emily's brown hair like a halo. Ms. Lauren sat across from her, her eyes patient and filled with love. "Emily," she said gently, "I called the Child Protective Services office. They're coming to talk to you. I can't stay silent any longer." Emily burst into tears. She didn't blame Miss Lauren, but fear rose in her, like a tidal wave. In her mind, Only her father's voice echoed, "Don't let anyone interfere. If you betray me—" Her hands gripped the hem of her worn uniform, tears rolling down her cheeks. Outside the window, the sky darkened. It was a sunset full of promise, but for Emily, darkness was descending, and the nightmare was only beginning. Emily sat on the wooden chair in the library, her eyes still red and swollen with tears. The ticking of the clock on the wall was so loud, it felt like it was counting down to the moment all her secrets would be revealed. Her little heart clenched, and her fingers fiddled with the frayed edge of her uniform. "Emily," Miss Lawrence said softly, "I know you're scared, but I'm here to help you. The people at Child Protective Services are too. They don't want to frighten you. They just want to make sure you're safe." Emily bowed her head, tears streaming onto her trembling hands. "But if Dad finds out, he'll be so mad. You don't have to worry about that." Ms. Lauren interrupted, her voice firm yet warm. "If they find there's danger, they can take you somewhere safe. You'll be cared for. You deserve to be loved, Emily." A sob shuddered through Emily's chest, fear and longing tearing at her heart. She knew how angry her father could get, how the beatings could leave her barely conscious, how his eyes burned with hatred whenever he was drunk. But in Miss Lauren's eyes, she saw a glimmer of hope, a grown-up who, like her mother once did, believed in her. When the final school bell rang, Emily reluctantly stood Mr. Buttons tucked safely in her backpack, like a protective talisman. Ms. Lauren placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent promise. "You're not alone, Emily." On the way home, fear wrapped around Emily like a thick fog. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. At the gate, she stopped her breath, hitching, as she saw her father's old green truck parked crookedly in the yard. Her heart pounded. The door opened, and there was Jack, his wrinkled shirt reeking of alcohol, his eyes red like burning coals. He glared at her. "Where have you been until now? I had tutoring," Emily mumbled. "Lies," he roared. A fury like fire ignited behind his glassy stare. He grabbed her arm, squeezing so hard she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. "Did you say anything to that teacher, huh?" He snarled, his voice a mix of whiskey and rage. "No, I didn't. I swear. Daddy." Emily stammered, her voice breaking. "Liar." The slap came down like thunder, burning so fiercely that everything spun before her eyes. She collapsed onto the cold tiled floor, her cheek on fire. For a fleeting second, her mother's sweet lullaby came to her, but it vanished, replaced by the smell of alcohol, fear and tears. Jack's breath came in harsh, stinking gasps. "Listen to me, Emily Morgan," he growled, jabbing his finger at her face. "Don't you ever open your mouth to anyone. I won't let anyone tear this family apart. Understand?" Emily could only nod furiously, her throat closing up. She knew if she spoke the truth, his rage would be even worse, and it would all be taken out on her small, fragile body. As night fell, Emily lay on her bed, the thin moonlight shining into the cold room. Mr. Buttons lay beside her, his black button eyes glinting as if he were listening to her every prayer. "Please, God. Please, someone. Save me," she whispered. But all around her was only darkness, the wind howling through the metal roof, and the sound of her father's heavy breathing from the living room. The next morning, Emily walked into class with heavy steps, her hair covering the marks of last night's beating. But Miss Lawrence still noticed. "Emily," she called softly as she passed her desk. "You can still talk to me any time." Emily lowered her head, tears threatening to spill. She was afraid. Afraid of her father. Afraid of the world. But she also longed to be saved. That same day, the Child Protective Services office and a police officer named David Turner came to the school. They invited Emily to the nurse's office to talk. She sat hunched in a plastic chair, her hands twisting the hem of her shirt. "Emily," the CPS worker, Sarah Collins said gently, "I want to ask you about the bruises on your body. Did someone hurt you?" Emily bit her lip until it bled. In her mind, her father's warning screamed, "Don't let anyone interfere." She shook her head vigorously, her eyes wide. I fell off my bike," she mumbled. Sarah Collins looked at her, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Are you sure? We only want to help you." Emily trembled, but still nodded. She didn't dare defy her father's warning. Sarah sighed, placing a light hand on her shoulder. "If anything happens, please remember this number." She pressed a small card into Emily's hand, with bold numbers on it. "Call any time you need help." Emily took the card, her hands trembling. In her heart was a storm of fear and hope. When she returned to class, Ms. Lauren's eyes glistened with tears. She gently squeezed Emily's hand, a silent promise that she was always there. But Emily knew the darkness was still lurking out there, a darkness named Jack Morgan. And she understood that tonight he would be more terrifying than ever. That night, the small house on Sycamore Street was shrouded in a thick darkness that seemed to swallow every sound. Emily sat huddled on her worn-out bed, her tiny hand clutching Mr. Buttons, her only friend, in these long, terrifying nights. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting her silhouette and that of the teddy bear on the peeling wall. In the living room, Jack Morgan, his face flushed from alcohol, staggered about his footsteps, pounding on the wooden floor, like hammers pounding on Emily's heart. Last night's beating hadn't been enough to rid him of his rage. Instead, it had ignited Emily's deepest fears, leaving her trembling. The door burst open, slamming against the wall. Emily jumped, her heart plunging into a pit of dread. Jack loomed in the doorway, his eyes bloodshot, reeking of alcohol. "You thought you could fool me?" His voice was thick and slurred, dripping with whiskey. "That teacher and those child protection people think they can save you. Huh? I don't need anyone to tell me how to raise my kid." Emily whimpered, tears streaming down her face. I didn't tell them anything." "Liar." His slap came so fast she couldn't even flinch. Pain seared across her cheek. Like fire, and she toppled to the floor, Mr. Buttons tumbling into the darkness. Jack raised his hand again, his fingers trembling, but his eyes burned with rage and a shadow of fear. "I feed you. I clothe you. You're supposed to obey me. If you dare betray me." He leaned down close to her, his breath hot and sour with alcohol. Emily sobbed, panic twisting her chest. I'm sorry, Daddy." Jack let his hand drop, but his eyes still blazed. "Tomorrow, I'll teach you who's boss in this house." He staggered out, slamming the door behind him. Emily sat dazed on the floor, tears streaming down her red cheeks. Outside, the night wind moaned through the dry branches. In her desperation, she grabbed Mr. Buttons, hugging him to her chest, as if for one last comfort. "Mommy, what should I do?" And then, like a miracle, a memory flooded back Sarah Collins' gentle words. "If you need help, call this number." With trembling hands, she dug through her backpack for the small card Sarah had given her. The bold numbers glowed like distant stars in the dark. Emily swallowed her tears, her heart pounding, and dialed the numbers one by one. "Child Protective Services. How can we help you?" A woman's warm voice came through the line like a gentle embrace in the night. "What's your name, sweetheart?" My name is Emily," she sobbed. "My daddy, he hits me. I'm so scared." There was a pause on the line, as if the worker was holding back tears of her own. "You're so brave, Emily. It was so brave of you to call us. I promise we'll help you. Stay in your room and lock the door. The police are on their way." Emily burst into tears, the fear lifting from her chest. "Okay." Within minutes, police sirens wailed down the street, blue and red lights flickering through the curtains. Emily pressed her ear to the door, listening. The urgent pounding of fists on the door echoed. "Police." Jack roared from the living room. "What do you want?" "This is my house, mister." "Jack Morgan." The officer's voice was firm. "We've received a report of child abuse. Please cooperate." "You've got no right," Jack bellowed. But then came the sound of a struggle. Bottles clinking, an angry shout. Then silence. Emily cracked open her door, her tear-streaked face trembling. The red and blue lights reflected in her eyes. A young officer crouched down to meet her gaze, his expression gentle and full of compassion. "Emily, Morgan?" he asked softly. She knotted her throat tight with fear and emotion. "You're safe now," he whispered, reaching out his hand. "Come here." Emily stepped out trembling and let him lift her into his arms. In that strong embrace, she heard the wail of the sirens fade. Outside, the darkness still pressed in, but blue and red lights cut through lights of hope, of freedom, and of a new beginning. In that moment, Emily knew a real miracle had come, because she had dared to speak, and someone had heard her cries for help. Outside the old house, the flashing lights reflected off the dew-dampened road, mingling with the pale moonlight of a cold Pennsylvania night. In the young officer's arms, Emily felt a strange warmth. No longer the acrid reek of whiskey, no more the furious shouts. Only a soft breath and the faint scent of cologne on his uniform. "You're so brave, Emily," he murmured, his hand squeezing hers like a promise that no one would ever hurt her again. A voice crackled from the radio on his shoulder, calling for backup. "We need support units. The subject may be combative." Emily looked at the dark house where her father, Jack Morgan, was struggling. A flashlight beam cut across the window painting flickering shadows on the walls, like dancing demons. "Let me go in." Another officer said loudly. It was David Turner, the policeman, with a determined yet compassionate look in his eyes. He held his flashlight, the other hand resting on his holstered gun, his voice low but resolute. Emily held her breath. She could hear her father's voice screaming all the way to the yard. "You've got no right. This is my house. I raised her. I get to discipline her. David." Turner stepped closer to the door, his voice calm and steady. "Mr. Jack Morgan, please, calm down. We're only here to ensure Emily's safety." "You bastard, I'll..." Jack roared, his voice choked by alcohol and fury. Suddenly, there was a loud crash, a bottle shattering. Emily flinched, her heart racing. The young officer pulled her back, shielding her small body with his own. David Turner's voice remained calm, but firm. Mr. Morgan put down the weapon. Now but heavy footsteps thudded from the living room. The door swung open. Jack lunged out, eyes wild and red, a metal rod in his hand. His face twisted with rage and desperation. "You're not taking her from me," he bellowed, swinging the rod. In an instant, David Turner stepped in, blocking him with his arm. The flashlight beam swung, illuminating Jack's face like a wild beast. "Emily." "Close your eyes," the young officer whispered. Emily buried her face in his shoulder, hearing the clang of metal on the floor, the crisp command, "Drop the weapon, police." Jack roared one final time, but then the sound of a struggle and the click of handcuffs echoed in the darkness. "Traitor, traitor." Jack's voice faded to a groan as two officers pinned his arms behind him. Emily peeked over the officer's shoulder. She saw her father, the man who had once been her protector, now collapsed, his face twisted in the police light's glare. A part of her heart ached, but her eyes fell on Mr. Buttons, the teddy bear now dirtied, being picked up and handed to her by an officer. "Here you go," he said softly, his hands trembling. "Your friend." Emily clutched Mr. Buttons, tears streaming down her face, but her lips curled into a weak smile. A whisper rose from deep inside. "I've been saved." David Turner stepped closer, kneeling to meet her eyes. "You're safe now, Emily," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "No one will hurt you again." Police sirens wailed, blue and red lights flashing across the front yard. The night wind brushed Emily's tousled hair. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt her chest lighten. In the flashing lights of the patrol cars, she knew she had finally been seen and heard. "You were so brave, Emily," David Turner said, his eyes full of pride. You did the most amazing thing. You spoke up. Emily wiped her tears, hugging Mr. Buttons to her chest. In that moment, she saw a glimmer of hope in her tear-filled eyes, and she knew the darkness was finally retreating. Tonight, Emily was no longer alone. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting a warm glow on the white walls. Emily opened her eyes, her breath still heavy, but her heart felt as though a boulder had been lifted after all these long, heavy years. Beside her bed, Mr. Buttons, her familiar teddy bear, sat neatly placed, its fur a little worn, but its black button eyes still shining brightly as if smiling at her. A warm, deep voice spoke. "Good morning, little princess." Emily turned to see the gentle eyes of Officer David Turner. His gaze now was no longer as stern as it had been the night before, but filled with kindness and admiration. He pulled up a chair next to her bed, his large hand resting lightly on her small one. "You did the bravest thing in the world. You spoke up," David said, his voice deep, yet as warm as spring's breath. "Now you're safe, Emily. Your father has been arrested, and he will be held accountable in court." Emily nodded softly, tears streaming down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. She no longer had to fear the heavy footsteps on the wooden floor, nor dread the sound of creaking hinges in the night. The door opened gently. A woman in neat business attire, with a bright face and warm eyes, stepped in. It was Sarah Collins from Child Protective Services. She carried a thick file in her hands, but when she saw Emily, she immediately set it aside and offered a tender smile. "Hello, Emily," Sarah said, her voice brimming with affection. "I've been waiting all morning to see you. You've been so incredibly brave." Emily's voice trembled. I didn't know if I could do it. I was afraid my dad would find me." Sarah shook her head gently, her eyes shining with determination. "Your father won't be able to hurt you anymore. He's been charged with child abuse, and the trial will happen soon. The law is on your side, Emily." Emily looked over at David, seeking reassurance. He nodded. "I've given a full report with all the evidence, and with your testimony, he will be held accountable." Sunlight streamed through the curtains, chasing away the darkness in her heart. Sarah continued softly, "You're going to be moved to a safe place, a temporary foster home. But first, we have someone very special who's asked to take care of you if you'd like." Emily's eyes widened. Who is it?" A knock came at the door, and then her teacher, Ms. Lauren Matthews, appeared, her face full of emotion, her eyes glistening. "Hello, Emily," Ms. Lauren said, her voice trembling, yet warm. "I've been so worried about you these past days. I've asked for permission to be your temporary guardian, so you can stay with someone you trust. But the decision is yours. Emily, would you like to stay with me?" Emily looked at Ms. Lauren in wonder, the woman who had gently smoothed her hair whenever she cried, whose loving gaze was so different from her father's fury. I want to be with you," Emily choked out. Ms. Lauren opened her arms, and Emily leapt into them, warm, safe, like the protective cocoon she had dreamed of for so long. Sarah Collins smiled contentedly and quickly signed some papers. For now, Emily will be in Ms. Matthews's care. Soon, we'll arrange for her to become your official guardian." David Turner stood beside them, his eyes full of faith. "I'll always be here if you need help, Emily. You'll never be alone again." Emily looked up at them, all the sunlight streaming through the window, lighting her face, and revealing the proud, sparkling eyes of a brave little girl. I really did it, didn't I?" she whispered, as if asking herself. "You did the most extraordinary thing," David said firmly. "You spoke up, and now justice is on your side." In that hospital room for the first time, Emily felt the light of dawn truly flood her heart, and she knew that from this moment on, her life was turning a new page. A page filled with love, protection, and hope. 2 years later, the sky over Pennsylvania had turned to spring, carrying with it the sweet scent of apple blossoms lining the roadside. In a small house with a cheerful yellow porch, Emily Morgan was now Emily Matthews, a girl with silky brown hair and eyes brimming with hope. This morning, she wore a bright yellow dress as she stood on the small stage at the Pinewood Community Center. Beside her, Lauren Matthews, now her legal foster mother, gently held her hand, offering strength. In the audience rows of chairs were filled with teachers, friends, social workers, and the police officers who had once rescued her. Their eyes shone with pride and love. David Turner sat in the front row, his warm gaze encouraging. He had become a special friend in Emily's new journey, the guide who taught her what justice, love, and courage truly meant. Facing everyone, Emily took a deep breath. Her voice rose, still a little timid, but stronger than ever. 2 years ago, I thought I was the loneliest child in the world. Every night I hugged Mr. Buttons and wished for a miracle to save me from my fear. But then I realized that the miracle wasn't far away. It was in my own voice. Her voice wavered, tears streaming down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of happiness and gratitude. "Thanks to Ms. Lauren, Officer David, and all of you who listened to me, I was saved. Today, together, we've built a project called Emily's Voice, a place where kids like me will be heard, protected, and given hope." The entire auditorium erupted in a wave of heartfelt applause. Ms. Lauren pulled Emily into a tight embrace, a promise that she would never let go. David Turner stepped onto the stage, his eyes shining with pride. "Emily, you turned your pain into a torch that lights the way for countless other children. You've proven one thing: when a child dares to speak, the world cannot look away. And that is the greatest strength." Emily looked up at the loving faces watching her. The fear of the past had faded, replaced by the brilliant light of trust and love. After the ceremony, Emily stood under the spring sunshine, holding Mr. Buttons, now stitched together with loving hands by Miss Lauren. She smiled and whispered to her teddy bear, "Mr. Buttons, we did it." Before her was the great open gate leading to a sunlit path. There stood Mom Lauren David, new friends, and children waiting to be helped. Emily Matthews, the little girl who once cowered in the dark, had now become a beacon of light for others. Her light shone, kindling hope. No matter how deep the darkness, even one candle can overcome it. Because all it takes is one person, someone loving enough brave enough to stand up and listen for the whole world to change. Time passed, and summer replaced spring in Pinewood, bringing with it bright golden sunshine that stretched across the small streets. Emily Matthews, the girl who once trembled in the dark, had now blossomed into a petite young woman with sparkling eyes, always lit with hope. With the guidance of her foster mother Lauren and Officer David Turner, Emily had become the founder and face of the Emily's Voice Project. Every weekend, she and her foster mother hosted sharing sessions where children who had been hurt came to listen to stories of healing, learning to believe in themselves and in those around them. One June afternoon, Emily stood in the middle of a bright, colorful room, sunlight streaming through the large windows, onto paintings created by the children, rainbows, sunflowers, and vibrant butterflies. Each painting told a story of hope and renewal. Dear ones, Emily began, her voice now confident and filled with love. I understand the fear of staying silent. I've been there. But I also know that just one voice, just one person listening, can change everything. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at the children sitting in rapt silence. She remembered that fateful night, remembered David's embrace as he carried her out of the dark house, remembered the warm grasp of Lauren's hand in court as she was declared her legal daughter. We are not alone, Emily continued, her voice shining like the stars. Here, everyone is heard. Here you are safe. Below the stage, David Turner sat beside Lauren Matthews, their eyes glowing with immense pride. They watched Emily from a trembling little girl to a lighthouse of hope. After the session, Emily stepped out onto the porch, gazing at the sunset painting the horizon red. A gentle breeze stirred the wind chimes into a delicate song. She hugged Mr. Buttons, now carefully stitched back together, like her own heart after all these years, and smiled. Beside her, David Turner asked softly, his voice deep and warm, "What are you thinking, Emily?" Emily tilted her head slightly, her eyes sparkling like gems. "I'm thinking, if I hadn't been brave enough to call Sarah that night if you hadn't come in time, I'd probably still be in the dark." David placed his hand on her shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "But you spoke up, and you saved yourself." Emily took a deep breath, her eyes determined. "Then I want to keep helping other kids find their voices. I want the world to know that every child deserves to be loved." David nodded slowly. "I'll always be here, right by your side." The brilliant sunset painted the sky like a masterpiece, closing out a long day. In Emily's heart rose a new feeling, confidence and strength. From now on, she was no longer the girl battered by her father, no longer the child hiding in a dark corner. She was Emily Matthews, the girl of light, of hope, of all the children who had never been heard. And she knew that this journey had only just begun.